9th, 2020, 2:02 p.m. Eastern Time. Paul Whitcombe joining me today as America is a little less on fire. That's been the opening for the last couple episodes, is America is on fire. I feel like it's a little less on fire. There's one of my favorite comedians is Duncan Trussell. It's more of like a philosopher than comedian. But I remember he had a tweet back in like 2015, and it was some poor, phoneless fool somewhere is sitting under a waterfall watching a sunset, not knowing how scared and angry he should be. And that every once in a while I'll come across, and I came across it earlier today for the first time in like a year or two. And every time I come across it, there's always just this like, how much insanity am I importing into my head? And how much is really going around? And I look around and it's neighbors, little girls running around on a lawn, a bird chirping, sun hitting the green leaves. And it's like, oh wait, I'm in Shangri-La. All this insanity I'm actively bringing into my life. So because of that, I haven't really been watching the news. So I actually don't know whether or not America is still on fire.
Well, it's still smoldering at the very least.
Yeah. You're out, for everyone tuning in for the first time. This is my friend Paul Whitcombe. He's a brilliant individual. Helped kill John Wayne Gacy in a way, and he and I share a ton of the same interests, and we've been going back and forth with books. And by that I mean I've had him reading books that I've read, and I'm going to let him choose the next one. But we've been discussing books. We discussed Operation Paperclip by Annie Jacobson a couple weeks ago. Last week we talked about the riots, and today we're going to talk about Raven Rock by Garret M. Graff, which is my favorite book. But before we jump into that, you're outside Chicago, and the last time we talked about this, you said the National Guard was mobilizing, but they haven't got the go-ahead to go in. What's changed?
Well, the protests have calmed down. It had gotten to the point where the National Guard was mobilized outside of the city. The mayor and the governor were telling the president to go to hell. They've got control of it. And the protests have died down, but at the same time, last weekend, Chicago suffered its most deadly weekend in 60 years.
I saw that.
And the mayor and the governor think they've got a handle on it, but I would say that's not true for the 80 people that were shot over the weekend. It's a terrible, terrible problem, and here we've got people all across the country crying to defund the police, including people in Chicago, and they can't even get control of their own streets.
Yeah, that's yeah, I saw that. Do you ever check your phone in the middle of the night? I'm terrible about it, and I do, and then I forget I do. But as soon as you said that, I was like, where did I look that up? How did I know that? And it was 2 a.m, go to the bathroom, check, and I saw, it was like, more men killed this weekend than by police. It was worded in some way. Someone obviously had an agenda. I don't remember what it was. But what was it? It was something like, how many men? What? And was this just riots, or was this just?
Oh no, this was just violence.
Par for the course.
Random Chicago violence. I think there were 86 shootings and 26 people killed.
Jesus.
It's a serious problem, and you're talking about one of the cities with the strictest gun control laws in the nation, and yet these people get a hold of guns and they are killing each other.
But that doesn't come up in the news ever. It's just
it doesn't serve the interest of the people who are holding the strings of power.
To that it's just that's not important. We don't need that. But it's 26 people killed, but it never pops up. There's no riots. There's no
just another weekend in Chicago.
And I mean, is it good or is it bad there are no riots over that? Because more riots aren't better, period. But
no, you're right. But what if that kind of violence took place in your neighborhood or my neighborhood?
Oh, they'd have the SWAT team here.
That's exactly right. The National Guard would be there standing on every corner. But our mayor in Chicago literally told Trump, "F you."
You got to get those political brownie points. It's you gotta cater to those who think will vote you in all of my political genius, because I've held office so many times. But it's so the first thing I thought about with when all these riots were kicking off, but also kind of with coronavirus, was I remember I was texting my friend in Atlanta, and I kind of said, just like an offhand comment, I was like, well, the good thing is we know continuity of government is in full swing.
There you are.
And he's very intelligent. He's much more intelligent than I am. I want to get him on my podcast. But I remember he was like, what is that? And I was like, continuity of government. You know it's going to be in full swing. And he was like, he stopped what he was doing. He was like, what's going on? He thought like something horrible was happening. Mm-hmm. And so, I shilled everyone in almost every episode, and I was like, read this book, Raven Rock by Garret M. Graff. The U.S. government's plan to save itself while the rest of us die. But Raven Rock is one of the complexes of what appears to be hundreds. It's Raven Rock. The most famous ones are Raven Rock, Cheyenne Mountain, NORAD, and Mount Weather, as well as the bunker under the White House. But there are hundreds of bunkers that technically began under FDR, but really got into full swing under Eisenhower and JFK. But there are, just like there's DEFCON, DEFCON 5 is pure peace, DEFCON 1 is global thermonuclear war. I think we went to DEFCON 3 on 9/11. I think, so that's just put it in perspective. And that is, what is it? Defense condition. Defense condition. Okay, it's basically readiness. It's like, yes. It's New Year's, New York City. They bust in like 25,000 cops. It's, you could say that is like a way of DEFCON. Like nothing's happened, but we just wanna, we want to have everything ready. But there's COGCON, COG, continuity of government, and that is much more secretive. But there are tiers of continuity of government readiness. And it can be, it's I would say it probably mirrors DEFCON. It's 5 would be, hunky dory. 1 would be the president's probably dead, who's next. And you have the successors to really every office imaginable. This thing has been fleshed out since the 40s. But as situations get more and more dangerous and existential, they start going from like checking in on to, let's say, the third in line successor of the Treasury for the state of Georgia maybe checks in once a month. As the COG-CON levels go lower, it could be every week, it could be every day, to the point of, down when it gets to like COG-CON 2 or 1, it goes from, you have to let them know where you are at like 9 a.m., and when it gets down to 1, they'll actually know, like, in the higher levels, they won't just know they'll know your location at all times. Like, when it gets to, like, the head of the government, it'll be like, all right, the Secretary of Defense he's currently moving down the hallway to the restroom. Like, that is how it gets to a point where it's, you're, almost like Harry Potter, like the map they have where it shows everyone moving around. It gets to that, where they start to, here he is. It's almost like you could almost say everyone starts to slowly get closer to like presidential Secret Service care. That's a better way of looking at it. They start to really know, where is everyone, who's at home, where are your children. And as this goes on, they know where everyone is, and they're starting to look at places of where are they going to drop this helicopter to grab you. They have all these sites around DC, not helipads, but makeshift areas that are hidden in plain sight. The end zone of a football field, the roof of a woman's dormitory, a parking lot outside of a Costco, whatever. And that's where you're going to be evacuated to. And very few people have their, where they are. I think they're just these like cards, gold cards. You get on the helicopter, you go to the nearest bunker, survive the heat pulse of thermonuclear war, and save the government and democracy from being obliterated. But I just remember thinking that whole explanation of coronavirus as it wasn't normal. Airports are shut down, March Madness canceled, Olympics delayed. There starts to be that general, almost you could say the hairs on the national back of the necks of the people, you could say, metaphorically start to rise. And it's thinking of that. I just remember thinking, because I've started listening to Raven Rock, I think the first time early in 2019, and I'm not kidding, I've listened to it through cover to cover, probably full cover to cover, probably 20 times. I'm not kidding. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, wow, I was like, coronavirus. I was like, this is not this is the world's coming down. I just thought, oh man, I bet COGCON's going into full swing. I bet they have some bunkers that are kept ready to go 24/7. They have other ones that are just like, go check on them every 30 days. Go make sure the AC works. Go make sure that the reservoir hasn't leaked, whatever. But as COGCON lowers, you start to move people into them. You start moving security in. You start moving chefs in there and doctors. You start literally updating people's prescriptions that are stored there. And you're getting ready for, is shit gonna hit the fan? So to end that rant, Paul, I know I've just berated you with a verbal onslaught. My computer's heating up. I'm going to turn on the little fan. Let me know if you can hear it, because you shouldn't be able to hear it. Can you hear that?
No.
Beautiful. So at the end of that rant, it's, as coronavirus started, I was like, oh, I bet continuity of government's starting to flow in motion. And forgetting that not everyone else is obsessed with this book, I naturally texted a friend and was like, don't worry, continuity of government's going. To him, that just sounded like, what do you mean? Is there a meteor? And I was like, oh shit. And yeah, I've tried to get so many people to read this book and talk about it with me, and no one has. Paul has finally indulged me. So yeah. So with the riot,
you're absolutely right. I mean, when the USS Roosevelt got hit with the virus, I don't think that we got a lot of press on it, but I think the government was very concerned that the Chinese were going to take advantage of the situation and move into the South China Sea or take Hong Kong or Taiwan.
Sure.
I think they were very concerned. And with our forward-based aircraft carrier incapacitated like that, I think even though it wasn't in the press, the very thought of the continuity of government was very real during this time, because we really were caught with our britches down.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. And that's something they kind of talk about in Raven Rock, though, is this isn't something you publicize.
No.
COGCON is very below the radar. DEF CON is, well, it's a lot harder to hide the movement of aircraft carriers, cargo planes, thousands of troops, tanks from satellites. You can't really hide them. DEF CON's a little more out in the open. And probably that might be even built into it. Let them know we're moving to DEF CON. Let them know that, we're rolling up our sleeves and putting the brass knuckles on.
Yes.
COGCON is very, very, it's not in the news. It's okay, let's heat up the bunker. Let's, do we have, how many aircraft do we have? Okay, we got contingency plans. Okay, where's the president? Are the nuclear weapons on alert? Okay, it's very, you don't want anyone to know that you're putting on the bulletproof vest.
So Tommy, explain what happens. Suppose we go back to the Theodore Roosevelt is pulled to the side with 1,500 cases of coronavirus. The other Pacific-based carrier, the Reagan's in dry dock in Osaka, Japan, and the Chinese decide to make a move towards Taiwan. What's happening as far as continuity of government to make sure that if this flares, there is continuity and control?
So what do I think in my not cleared on any back channels from my just obsessive reading of that? I would say that so some of the bunkers are kept just ready to go 24/7. You would never know inside whether or not there is or isn't nuclear war. They're always pristine, popping. And I would venture to say that that's NORAD, Mount Weather, and Raven Rock. For this, I would say that the first thing they're doing is probably just quite literally upping the nearby, because it's a relocation arc. What it is they have bunkers in this entire arc from. It kind of sounds almost like from like Boston, like, you know, if your pivot was in here, almost swinging down to probably where I am, about Maryland. You have this whole arc, so it's wherever you are, you can dip down real quick and jump below literally jump below the surface. So I would say that they're probably moving those from the skeleton crew to more and more people. You're sending in physicians, so they're ready to go. You're getting all the generators up and going, testing all the air filtration systems. I would say that they are the top successors. I would say that their security is probably beefed up. I would say that things where they normally sort of get the leftovers, you know, priority one is the president. I would say that they probably very subtly, wherever they are, there might be an extra helicopter or an extra second helicopter. I would say, you know, Secretary of the Treasury, let's say he's giving a speech in Boston or something. And you know that he's going to be up there for 4 days. I think you would have all those bunkers very quietly, stocked to capacity, all the lights on, get everyone going. You would have, really, I would say the very top people, wherever they are. You're giving a speech in Atlanta and then Miami. Okay, I would make sure everything from Atlanta to Miami is just prepped and ready to go. And then for the lesser successors, I think you're probably keeping tabs on them more. Okay, you know, coronavirus is hitting the Roosevelt. Now all of a sudden, the 20th in line, I think you might say he gets an extra. I don't know. Maybe you assign a helicopter. Maybe just wherever he is, there's always just like a Secret Service driver. You know, some armored truck, some tactically trained driver. And again, it would be okay. You're going to be in this area. You're going to hit one of these couple bunkers. It would be one thing they do is they make sure all the legislation is up to date, because they have legislation on the shelves ready to go for
sitting there with the blanks to be filled in, right?
Yeah, literally. Yeah, they said like Mad Lib. That's the quote, Mad Lib style. You have the first thing you do as president is you initial all of them so they're ready to go. But yeah, you go in and you take it off the shelf on this June 9th of 2020 years Anno Domini, due to coronavirus 19 pandemic. We are suspending this, and that. This is the new acting director of this. I would say that's probably what they're doing. It's like you can hear like the thunder of the guns in the distance. What you're starting to do is you're starting to lock all the doors aside from the necessary ones. Hey, everyone, let's get an ammo count. It's kind of what that is you're just, you know, it's last week I was here by myself, family out of town, but all the riots are going off. I'm in a place that's not touched by it. But even then, I could say that there was my little CogCon. I normally don't leave lights on at night. I kept a light on in like the upstairs and the downstairs. I made sure every door was locked, and kind of just made sure where everything was. I was like, it's nowhere near me. The nearest riots are probably Baltimore, like 200 miles away. But it was like I went from like CogCon 5 to CogCon 4. Not much. Flipped on a couple extra lights. May or may not have had a crowbar next to the bed. Like, let's just, okay. If it got closer, let's say I was in Baltimore visiting my friends, I can imagine, well, I don't have one anymore. I would imagine I would probably, if I still had it, I would imagine I would keep my Glock on me. Mm-hmm. I highly doubt I would sleep. If I was in Baltimore, I think I'd be making plans to get out the next day, but let's say the sun's setting, I'd probably make some coffee and be like, okay, I'm staying up tonight. And I need to get out of here. CogCon 1 would be like you're firing the gun, you're getting under, you're getting beneath the table. But it's all just, is there an active shooter in the area? Okay, maybe it's 10 miles away. Probably still going to lock the doors, just because in relation to the norm, things are kind of getting hairy. So I would say that that's probably going on, yeah, with the carriers. I would say that's probably very quiet. We're seeing some less quiet riots in D.C. Trump went to the bunker. It's trending on Twitter. Bunker bitch, baby bitch. Whatever. if you think that this hasn't gone on since FDR literally had a ramp to go down to the Treasury bunker, down to the vault, because that was the first bunker where we had all the gold. We're going to put the president down there. If you don't think that this is...
You know how far we've come from the stuff that we're going to talk about today, and that you've been teaching us a little bit about here, from the first time, and hopefully the only time, that the White House was actually abandoned, and Dolly Madison took the key to the Russian ambassador and left it with him.
Yeah.
And they left town.
Yeah, in good faith.
Turned off the lights, and, that was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now we've got this incredibly complex industry that nobody, except for a few very smart people like yourself and other people that have read these books, know about.
Yeah.
And what was it that made us realize, wait a minute, our whole way of life is vulnerable here. In one fell swoop, in a matter of seconds, our entire system of government can be wiped from the face of the earth.
Yeah, it's in it. I believe they said, they go through all these different things, but it started with FDR. I think the first thing was when they said that his motorcade got lost in like the Grand Canyon or something. That's right at the beginning, and it's just like it was just some random, I don't know, maybe late 30s or something. Oh no, it might have been 40s, because I think they were trying to get in touch with him. They had no idea where he was. And it was like, we weren't at war yet, but it's like, well, all of Europe is at war. And it's just, we're at a point where our wheelchair-bound president, where is he? I don't know. I thought you saw him. And they were just lost. And I think it started with that. And then with Pearl Harbor, it jumped up a notch. It was, what are we doing? Like, hold on. Wait. What are we actually doing? Do we know when is shit going to hit the fan? It's going to take 7-8 hours for German bombers to get over the Atlantic, or the Japanese, or we thought Pacific. Sneak attacks are possible now. And what did they do? They went and got Al Capone's impounded armored limo for FDR, which I think is just the most badass factoid ever.
What a great story.
Great story. Yeah. And it was the day of Pearl Harbor. Or was it the next day? I think it was
the next day, because weren't they sitting there at the White House looking out the window for German bombers?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. They were turned down. Some of the security people, they wanted sandbags, and they're like, that's bad optics. But they put AA emplacements there, and then because AA emplacements were so rare, because of, I guess now we were going, well, before that we were just Lend-Lease, but they also put up like wooden ones that from a distance looked like AA guns. They put an entire, I don't know the proper military terminology, like chemical warfare corps or gas corps stationed full time at the White House.
Yes.
FDR had a gas mask, literally, so they just like clothespined it to his wheelchair. Yes. And it was, and they're getting, and what was the next thing? Well, I guess this would be more under Truman, but when they said, you're on a Secret Service, or, no, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So with FDR, we didn't have a full-on bunker, but they did build a ramp to go to the Treasury, because there was a vault there. And it was, if anything happens, that's what we'll do. And, that's kind of how it begins. And then, what is it? Churchill literally went and toured the Fuhrer bunker.
Well, I think Truman went as well.
Okay.
Because none of us really knew the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki till later.
Yeah.
And Truman, when he went to Potsdam, I think he spent part of his time touring Berlin and became convinced that our government was far too centralized and could be wiped out by aerial bombardment. And that's what really started the thinking about needing to decentralize and to have government A, the B team, and a C team, and a D team, and an E team, and an F team, down to where the U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Illinois could actually become the president.
Yes.
In these succession plans. So I think that's where it all started. And the whole communication system started when you were talking about Roosevelt getting lost in the Grand Canyon. There was no leader of the free world.
Yeah.
For a couple hours, I think.
Yeah. And it was just, you're right. And Truman was, he was, what am I looking for? He was being shown all the bombings of I think Dresden or something. He was in an airplane, and they just flew him over to look at it. And he said he didn't see a single standing structure. And then with the dropping of the atomic bomb, then it all really changed. And now it was like, okay, even if they just get one bomber through, even if Curtis LeMay used to say, it doesn't matter if you shoot down 9,000 of my B-17s, if one of them gets through. Well, he said one will always get through. And then once the atomic age came about, then it became all you need is one. And I think they said, when was the Pentagon Construct? 47? I don't remember.
Somewhere right in there, yes.
I know the Department of War was founded on my birthday, August 7th. But I think someone said the Pentagon would have never been constructed. Maybe they started before the A-bomb was dropped, because they said it would never have been constructed in the atomic world. Because
it's a target.
You're right. They started to look at it as, it was almost like the entire nation was a 747 and DC was the cockpit. And there was no door blocking it. And it's like, dude, you could just go in there with one grenade or 2 bullets. Bam, bam. Gonzo. You don't need to worry about the rest of the plane, because that will take it all down with it.
That's right.
And it was, we need to start decentralizing. But even then, it was, what is the immediate thing we need to do? And it was, I think it was when they said the Secret Service went on a war footing. The president was no longer just, you could no longer get close to him. Basically, we beefed up security in World War II, and we never stopped.
We're still on that war footing.
We're on a war footing. You can no longer get like this close to the White House. The president is no longer like, he snuck away from his Secret Service detail when he was vice president, I think. He went to the bank. He kind of dipped out. And they didn't know where he was. And yeah,
didn't they say up until 1910 you could actually walk into the White House, and if the president wasn't there, you could sit at his desk, put your feet up.
Yeah. And yeah, I think because when Truman got his first Secret Service detail, he was in his office, and he realized that there was a guy sitting out there all day, and he finally asked his secretary, he said, does that young man need me? And he was told by someone else, that's your Secret Service detail. And he thought that it was just because the guy drove with them that morning. And he's like, oh, I thought that was my driver's friend hitching a ride. Yeah. And it's like, that puts it in perspective. That it's just like, hey, man, can I get a ride? Yeah, I'm also taking to the president of the White House. Yeah, sure. Can I just hop in? You can drop me off up here. That was like, that's what Truman thought it was. So that shows the level of just, I don't know, maybe false security. Because really up until the A-bomb, because even with just bombers, it would still take bombers hours and hours and hours to get overseas. So, I mean, if you're in the United States and we got the Pacific over here, the Atlantic over here, you're not coming down over Canada. It was like, you're not getting anywhere close. Like, you don't need to be walking around uptight.
That's right. We didn't have any need for a standing military for all those years, because geographically we were in a fortress.
Yeah. Good luck.
And to a lesser degree, it was true of England for centuries and centuries.
The moat, not the moat, the English Channel. The English Channel.
Yeah.
You just, it didn't matter. We have this. What are you going to do? You got horses? Cool. You can't get across this. You'll freeze to death.
Right. And we learned that we're no longer invulnerable. You know, the Japanese didn't strike mainland America except with a couple of hot air balloons, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we were very, very fortunate there. And the Aleutian Islands, I think, were bombed on one occasion as well.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a total change of thought about how we had to think about instead of national defense, we come up with the term national security.
Yeah,
which is a totally different concept.
Yeah. It's literally security of the state. I think that's the misconception. Is national security. I think Ed Snowden said that on Joe Rogan's podcast. He said, we think of national security of America. National is it's a fancier term, or it's a more euphemistic for like federal government elite. Tommy security doesn't mean security for everyone Tommy knows. It means Tommy security. It's my guys. So by calling it national security, you think, oh, United States. And that's not to say that the government isn't out here protecting the United States. They are. But primarily it's up top. It's Dr. Strangelove kind of thing. And yeah, with Truman, I don't remember what it was that kicked it off, but I think they made an official presidential bunker, right? So FDR had the thing that he could kind of literally roll down. With Truman, they actually put one under, I want to say it was under part of the front lawn.
Yeah, something like 40,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And they covered it up by the fact that the White House was in such dire need of renovation.
Yeah. Because, a piano literally fell through one of the floors, and they're like,
yeah,
okay.
Well, Truman's daughter was playing the thing.
Yeah.
And boom. It was like a thing out of the Three Stooges.
Yeah, really, yeah. And, they took that as a perfect cover. Removed tons of debris, got all this construction equipment in there, noise, we got to move the president. So the optics are already there of we're renovating. So they put in a massive bunker. And they had, what is it, almost like a mud room, a decontamination room.
Yes, with the shower and everything.
Yep, so you could clean off all the radiation, change of clothes for everyone. They had bunk beds, food, water, and the president, which is almost the case with all of these bunkers, only the president has his own place. Everyone else is on cots, but the president has his own little suite with a big old chemical toilet. And that's about it. Reinforced, I think they said so it could take direct hits from bombs. But that was really just the beginning of you're just going to jump right underground. And they wanted it right there at the White House, so there didn't have to be any fanfare. You could just go straight down. And from there, it really only progressed with, it really started with, I believe it's in Raven Rock when they talk about the Beard Lot Project, which led to the creation of the hydrogen bomb, which I always thought was cool. They called Campbell in all their notes. Campbell as in Campbell soup, soup as in super, super as in the super bomb, which is what the hydrogen bomb was known as.
And rightfully so. I believe that the first hydrogen bomb was equivalent to twice the total explosive power expended during the entire Second World War.
Including Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Yes. I mean, can you even get your brain around
it's
that kind of destructive power?
You can't. Didn't Eisenhower say he understood it theoretically because he was the logistics master?
Yes.
But just really putting it into, wait, what happened? Wait, what can happen? And they said with Truman, you got to cut me off, Paul, because I get too excited about this. So I could go on rants. But they talk about how Truman, who in World War I, they had the biggest bombs, which were, maybe like a ton, like 2,000 pounds, these huge shells. And then up through World War II, dropping all the 2,000 pound dumb bombs. Mm-hmm. And then they went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where the bombs are equivalent to 15 and 20 kilotons, respectively. A kiloton is a kiloton, 1,000 tons of equivalent explosive power. Then under the hydrogen bomb, we jumped up to megatons, millions of tons of explosive power. So it's the jump from atomic bombs to thermonuclear bombs was almost on par with the jump from dumb bombs to atomic bombs. You don't really think about that because most pictures you just go, yeah, it's an atomic bomb, nuclear bomb, whatever. You're just arguing semantics. They're all mushroom clouds. You ever look at a picture, any video ever of any atomic bomb testing? Where is it? It's out in Nevada. You can normally see the mountains in the background. Whatever. Look at every single video of every hydrogen bomb. Why is it always out in the ocean? There's nothing to scale. It's because you cannot fit it. You cannot fit these things. They are thousands of times stronger. Thousands.
Right. Mushroom clouds that are miles.
Go up.
I think, wasn't it the second hydrogen bomb that they said was equivalent to 50 billion bombs dropped during World War II? 50 billion?
55 billion, because the head of the CIA said, the head of the CIA said, wow, that's enough to drop 1 billion dumb bombs in every state in the Union and still have 5 billion left over just for good measure. It's incomprehensible. And you are too young to remember the terror that we lived under. I remember as a child that they would show us a movie of the mushroom cloud, play the siren, and they'd have us get under, duck and cover, like that was going to do you any good. Yeah, birth the turtle.
But we lived in a world then where everyone was certain that eventually the bomb was going to be dropped. No weapon has ever been invented that wasn't used in warfare. Eventually.
Yeah, it was a matter of time.
And we were all certain that it was going to. So even though the whole idea of civil defense was how this always started, and it always kind of came back to protecting the populace, it always wound up what you're talking about, the continuity of government.
Yes.
And the attempts to protect the populace always got abandoned along the way. And we just assumed that everyone will die except for a select few government people who will make some attempt to continue our way of life. I mean, there wasn't even provisions for the wives and families of these people at first.
No, yeah.
Which I thought was real interesting is, was it Donna Brazile, who was the Clinton, she was a chief of staff or something that was an advisor on the West Wing?
Yeah. And they had you explain it. Yeah,
it's a great story. It's somebody else, George Stephanopoulos, had tipped them off to the fact that he had a little card that described where to go and who was going to pick him up in the event of some kind of a national cataclysm. And he told the producers of the West Wing, and they worked it into their story. And Donna Brazile pulled the producer aside and said, you realize that's fiction. That doesn't really exist. We don't have those cards.
Yeah, that's just...
Not knowing that she simply had not made the cut.
Yeah.
That Stephanopoulos had.
Yeah.
And it's fully true. That whoever has this card in their wallet, boy, that's the true Willy Wonka.
The true golden ticket. Yeah, but
right
it's crazy because Donna Brazile, she wasn't just some citizen going, hey, that's some Ian Fleming, fictional. No, she was or so thought. She was on the inside. And she said, hey, this is you're gonna lose credibility. And then she found out everyone around her did have these cards back in the day, and she just wasn't cleared. That's
exactly right.
That's where it starts to raise the eyebrows. That kind of shows just how on the inside people had to be. And you're right, very early on, which is kind of an interesting thing, back to Truman, was that, I don't think it was just like conjecture. I think they actually thought there were like Soviet bombers on the way.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, I'm not leaving here. He said, someone needs to be here on the radio, or, someone can basically literally die on the hill with me. And he said, the government will go on without me just fine. We've practiced these procedures. We have successors. But he said, as the president, he said, I'm staying here, and I'm going to talk to the people and, guide them through in the final moments. Which is something that they said you see with almost all of the presidents, which is what I thought was neat. Is even with George W. Bush, very much so was not on board with getting out of Dodge, and even I think this was in maybe Killing Kennedy by Bill O'Reilly. JFK talks about like, no, he has Jackie and the kids flown in. They're up at a lake. I think it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He said like, I want to be with them, but like, no, I'm not ditching here because it's, yeah, but that's the thing is, so as your relocation arc grew, and it got more and more finely tuned, which really began with I think Eisenhower. Because Eisenhower was like, now we're testing these ICBMs, and now we're even launching them from submarines. We are now at a point that a bomb, not an atomic bomb, but a thermonuclear bomb, not being dropped by a bomber, but on the top of a missile going at Mach 23 on re-entry. So we are now getting to a point where the enemy can sort of just snap their fingers and the hand of God comes down on a city. You have this many seconds, was it 1,600 seconds, to know that it's going to be here. Because Soviet subs right off the coast. They said you don't even need to do a full ballistic arc. You can just pop right there, right over.
Right.
And so Eisenhower really started to look at it as like, okay, we are quite literally like under the shadow of the bomb. So this thing needs to be, and I believe that's when the relocation arc started, because it was no longer, all right, we need to get the president up to the bunker, get him on the presidential train. It was like, no, you got to be able to, like, you really got to, Mr. President, grab him. We have 4 minutes and 11 seconds until detonation.
Yes.
And you got to be able to have equally hardened bunkers really everywhere. You really got to be, when it's that close at all times, you got to be really anywhere. You got to be able to, basically, the president has panic rooms up and down the East Coast, and I would imagine now probably all over the United States, if not the world.
Oh, I think you're probably right.
Because you got to remember, and when Garret Graff wrote this book, he only has what's been declassified.
Right.
So it's, you know, it kind of gets less and less sexy as it gets closer and closer to the recent events, but it's probably because he's just not cleared for it, man. Why would he be?
I'm sure there's a lot that we don't know. This was all secret for the last 70 years until just recently.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew about Weather Mountain, and we knew about NORAD, but we didn't have any idea of all these contingencies and who was on the list. There's even been isn't there a TV show called Survivor or something like that, where some lower level bureaucrat becomes president because everyone else is wiped out? First Survivor.
I don't know, but it makes sense.
I think there is. I think it fictionalizes this whole idea.
Yeah.
And Tom Clancy did it in his Jack Ryan series, where Jack Ryan is some kind of undersecretary of state who becomes president.
Yeah.
After an attack.
Yeah. Not only that is, it's very real. You have the designated survivor. So you got if you have everyone in one place, you take one and you bring them somewhere way out. Do you know on the night of the 2016 election, I'm not making this up.
Mm-hmm.
John Kerry was in Antarctica.
What?
Swear to God. Fact check me. These are one of the few things that I can watch me be wrong. Was in Antarctica. I don't know if that speaks to how crazy 2016 was, but when everyone was there,
yeah,
it was either the night of the election or the night of the inauguration. I think it was election, which is weirder because the election is not really a grouping of, but so jumping all over the place. But yeah, with Eisenhower, he said that this thing needs to be, you need to get to a point where it's a reflex. I think that's what Dale said about like shooting and being able to clear rooms and Delta Force and wink, wink, nudge, nudge, other government agencies. Right. But it gets to a point where like you can't be thinking, okay, well, flashbang just went off and this is happening to my right, so if I can remember A, B, C, D, it means I'm going to the left. No, it has to be reflex. I go to swing at you, you're going to go like that. An MMA fighter, it's reflexive where they're not even going to think twice before they have you on the ground with their elbow on you.
Right.
So Eisenhower really wanted it like that. It was to be reflexive because he said in the wake of this thing, he said, you're going to have men who have gone mad. They're going to be absolutely nuts. Because for their country, for their family, for their God. They're not going to know what was going on. So under Eisenhower is where it started to get really hardcore. And it was also under there that they started to realize that you had to have all these heads of all these different things. You couldn't just have the president and the vice president. You needed, what was it? Eisenhower's czars. You needed people to, how are you going to restart the economy? You need guys that were going to oversee all of this because you got to jumpstart the economy if society's going to go on. And that's when, as the number of people that were designated to survive grew, it's when you all start to run into the problem of most of these guys were like, I can't take my wife and kids. Like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to go.
Yeah. Right. They're packing for a 3-day trip and they have nothing planned. And the wife's like, what are you doing? Yeah. Oh, can't discuss it.
Yeah.
And the wives are pretty upset because all kinds of secretaries and stenographers and
the war girls. Yeah.
The war girls are going as well.
Yeah. Eisenhower's driver, who he had an affair with. I mean, they all knew. And, oh yeah. I mean, FDR was literally in Warm Springs, Georgia, when he died and was having his affair. And not only that, but Eleanor knew.
Yeah.
and different time, man. But
it didn't seem to affect her relationship with him.
Well, she didn't want to do anything about it because she didn't want to affect the image of the office of the presidency.
Things sure have changed.
Different time, yeah. Part of me wants to salute her because it's man, just that level of teamwork in president or in America or patriotism. And part of me is man, what a backwards time. Poor woman. How come she's not allowed to have someone that loves her equally? But
well, I think that there's probably a whole other podcast on that too.
Yeah.
I think Eleanor had her own, shall we say, peccadillos.
She did?
She pursued.
You think so?
I do.
I started a book on FDR last fall, and I never finished it. It was 40 hours long. It was kind of dry. But yeah, I got right down to the point where he was having an affair. And insulting stuff. FDR's friends used to say, well, can you blame him? Look at Eleanor. Jesus, man.
That's cold.
Look at FDR. He looks like the Penguin, and he's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Jesus, man. But so... And it really, so it starts to get almost James Bondy-ish with, did you get to the, what is it? What's the hotel? The Congressional Hotel.
Oh, I can't remember the name of it.
But you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, it gets to a point where they had an entire, I can't remember the name. Greenbrier. They have a hotel about an hour outside D.C., where they literally went in and built an entire relocation area for all of Congress.
Yeah. And similar for the Supreme Court.
And this, yeah. I mean, down to the point where they had their prescriptions stocked. They had desks ready for them. They had typewriters. They had everything ready to go. They had these huge freezers, which becomes the norm that the freezers will now double as the morgue. They had alcohol there, just in case any senators had to get weaned off.
Yes.
And it was literally that's how you know these guys are prepared. That's how you know they're prepared, because it wasn't just we have guns and food. They had whiskey to wean off senators.
Yes.
And they had contraceptives because they knew all the secretaries were coming.
Yeah.
Hey man, that's how you know it's accurate. That's how you know it's accurate.
It's real life.
Yeah. I mean, shit, in the time of JFK, that's how they knew. That's how.
You bet.
Yeah. And they also had riot gear in case it got unruly in there, which they thought it would. They had riot gear and weapons in case they needed to shut down a rebellion. But what I thought was perhaps the most interesting, I don't know, the FDR armored limo factoid, I think that takes the cake for me. But my second favorite would be how in bed AT&T and the government are.
Oh yeah, those guys working for AT&T building that communications network.
Yeah, they still have. I don't know why I'm saying had and have. Used to too. Mitch Hedberg, but they built an entire network. It's not that they had phones that used us peasants use, and they had their own special lines. No, they had their own backbone, literally for them. Towers, relay stations.
I love Mitch Hedberg, by the way.
Yeah. I still do, but used to too.
But yeah, I used to too.
Yeah, I used to too. Do you want a banana? No. Do you want a frozen banana? No, but I would like a normal banana later. So yeah. Alcoholism's the only disease you can yell at people for. You're not like, God damn it, Otto, you have lupus. Damn it, Otto.
Guy is an amazing genius.
He was. Used to too, yeah. Unfortunately. I believe he overdosed.
Horrible loss. I mean, it's just, he has some bits that just crack me up.
He destroys, unlike anyone else. It's man, was it him? I don't know if it was him. Man, I used to work at the fire hydrant factory. Couldn't park anywhere near the damn place.
Yeah, right. Stuff is great. But getting back to the communication network, just for this.
Yeah.
Here, I live in the hometown of Ronald Reagan,
Oh yeah.
about a block and a half from his house, his boyhood home.
Really?
And so when Reagan became president, he visited here a few times, but they began preparations because they knew there'd be a funeral someday for the president. And they put in one of these, some node of this communication network. So in the basement of my church, underneath the choir room, there's this big panel in there. And all around downtown are these big grates that are about 4 feet by 4 feet. They don't match anything else. And they were put in, and underneath there is the guts of this system that could keep the nation's leaders in contact while they were here with the president or at the president's funeral. And I walk over that grate on the way to work every day.
Please,
so I've seen that actually take place.
please send me a picture of that.
I will.
It's their own thing. It's not only JFK but McNamara. They had their own car phones in the 60s.
Yes.
I mean, it is insane. They talk about installing these nodes. They said they'd come in, you'd be a new whatever successor to the Secretary of Defense, new Pentagon official, just someone who was in the need to know and whose position and livelihood was deemed irreplaceable. So they had to survive. They'd have these guys come in and install comically, these red phones in like your bedroom.
Yeah.
And they'd come in and like the guys would say, I don't know where this goes to, and I don't know where it comes from. They had someone else install that.
Yes.
This whole compartmentalization of like, I don't know this, I don't know that. Like, I'm not picking up this cord and following it. Like, I don't want to know. I just, I don't want any part of this. I'm going to install this and I'm going to go home. But it's
right.
Yeah. And so they have these line of sight antennas and relay stations and literal phone lines across the entire nation. And not only that, but they had doubles of most of these. And so when you go up to one of these nuclear part of the relocation arc and you go find them, they said it's always weird because you'll have like, you good? Everything good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. You'll have like a guard station, like a little like 10 by 10 foot thing with like a toll booth. And then you'll have like a 500 car parking lot. And that's it. And it's like,
yeah, right.
Yeah. You guys need all these cars? But it's because the entire, all these things, I mean, they're hundreds of thousands of square feet. A lot of these things, they sit on springs so they can move and sway with nuclear blasts. And what I thought was the coolest part is a lot of these have almost like ICBM silo doors. They have things so after the original pulse of the sun vaporizes everything, except for these, which I still think is classified just what the concrete's made of. What happens is they have bulldozers. So they have bulldozers which they can bring out of hardened bunkers. And these bulldozers sweep off this area, and then like a missile silo door, this thing will move, and these big antennas come out almost like a satellite. It gets launched and then unfurls. They literally have this thing. So after their secret backbone has been wiped out, because it doesn't matter if it's secret, if it's above the surface and a thermonuclear warhead goes off and it's 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit in the area, it doesn't matter. It's all turning to iron dust. They have these things where they literally sweep off, and then these big ears come out, and they're all in connection again. It is...
Yeah.
It is...
At the very beginnings of the internet.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the most beautiful, like, simple ironies of history is this thing that was created by, before it was even DARPA, it was ARPA. This thing to keep, that was the other thing they talked about with all these bunkers. They started to go, how are we going to communicate? Because what am I the president of? I'm the president of this bunker. What am I? You're the king of your own room. Like what? It's that, or was it LeMay? I think it was LeMay's number 2 man. He said, "Without my phone, I am I am the general of my own desk, and let me tell you, it is not a formidable weapon. But
Yes.
give me a phone, and I can wipe out a nation." So these backbones were so important that AT&T was getting such massive contracts that when the Justice Department went to break up the AT&T monopoly, the Pentagon stepped in, or the Department of Defense stepped in and said, like, you can't know why, but you can't do this.
Yeah.
It is vital to national security and the survival of the democracy, or the continuation of the republic. Man, I don't know what's more of you're a lawyer. I don't know what's more of a smack in the face to how do I go against that?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's a tough one, but they did eventually break up AT&T.
Yeah, I wonder I'm sure they had to. We won't know. Maybe we'll figure it out in 2050. But
Right.
Yeah. But the factoid that I love is that they have on top of like all the telephone poles in the U.S., primarily around big cities, they'd have these like boxes that almost looked like transformers. And this goes back to the 50s and 60s. And it was these things that could pick up the light signature of an atomic or thermonuclear blast. And because, again, just gives power. No pun, but gives power to the power of these weapons is that they have a light signature that is different from even supernovas and hypernovas in the universe. These things have a light signature unlike anything else in the universe, which splitting the atom. Mm-hmm. And there's like a primary and like a secondary, like X-ray pulse or something. Whatever it is, far beyond the scope of my understanding and this podcast, these things could pick it up and they could triangulate it. And they would pick it up and they'd be able to send the message to wherever the headquarters was. I think it was the NMCC. It was wherever the brains were of the continuity of government infrastructure. And they'd be able to pinpoint where one of these things went off. So even if a nuke slipped through and no one knew it was launched and it was just detonated, they would know, because they'd get the light signature and then they would be vaporized by the thermal pulse. But they would send off a message before they are vaporized. So imagine going around just being like a kid in the 50s. Imagine being into like sci-fi or conspiracies, and someone were to come up to you and say like, hey, see this like telephone pole in your neighborhood? This is directly linked to a nuclear bunker in DC. But these things are all over the US, and that's how we would, one of the many things we would use to know whether or not a city had been destroyed. And it just still boggles my mind.
You know what's interesting is today, I'm sure those are still in place, but now they also have sonophones that can triangulate the location of gunshots. So in a large city, they know how to dispatch the police.
Oh yeah. Well, they also used I think they started in Iraq and Afghanistan. They'd put them on top of the Humvees. That's how they'd triangulate the sniper fire.
Right.
Yeah, it really ruined their day once you could find out where it came from, because then the turret would just turn. Yeah, send them to their 72 virgins. Goodbye, podcast channel. YouTube. It's been fun, gentlemen. It's been an honor. Down to the continuity of podcast, PodCon. Which I have.
Welcome to the B team now.
Yeah. Welcome to the B team, the C team. Yeah, it's me and Paul. Paul, you're taking over. This is podcast afterwards. The other thing I wanted to talk, and don't let me keep you, by the way. I can talk forever, and don't let me hold you hostage.
I'm not worried about it.
All right. I told some of my friends that the other day, but they are much less formal, and they're like, dude, shut the fuck up. Shut up about that. And I was like, okay. But so what are and this is one thing I remember thinking about when I was younger was, and I believe you and I talked about this, is once it got to the point that everyone had the thermonuclear bomb, it no longer became how big could you make it, because it's diminishing returns. It's you need a cubed explosive power to increase, what is it, cube square? You had to, it was to add like an extra 10 feet to the blast radius, you had to add like another 100 times explosive power.
Yeah.
So it got to a point where once we got up to Tsar Bomba, 58 megatons, they really didn't, what are we doing? And if that was supposed to be 100 megatons, it got to a point where it didn't matter. It all became about delivery systems. And it all became about how fast can you get it there now. It's, how, and can 1,600 seconds from a Russian-based submarine off the coast of D.C., how quickly can we get it there now? Because that's how you're going to chop off the heads, the decapitation strikes of your enemy. So I remember thinking about this when I was younger. I thought younger, maybe in college, but I remember thinking, wouldn't you want to, over like decades, even in your allies, what you would want to do is maybe in embassies or in CIA corporation fronts, wouldn't you want to construct thermonuclear weapons in every nation and city on Earth? And this would have to be the most classified thing. You couldn't let anyone know about this. But it would be, wouldn't you want that there? So if at any point in the future, maybe fast forward to 2080, and for all we know, Great Britain is the new USSR, and we've been fighting them for 10 years.
And we've already got a bomb planted there?
Not even one that you got to deliver. It's just there. Right there. No heads up. Not 60 seconds, not 10 seconds. Just, that is the decapitation strike.
The suitcase bomb.
Well, even that still implies delivering. Constructed and it sits there, and hopefully you never have to use it. But it would be you put them everywhere. And in Raven Rock, they talk about when JFK met with that journalist, and they were talking about the problems of Berlin and how it had been taken over by the Soviets, but it was... and then we had our half of Berlin, but I believe Berlin was in the Soviet half of Germany, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we had our own little island of Berlin Airlift, our own little island of democracy. And right. I believe it was during the Berlin Airlift. Was it Khrushchev at the time? When Khrushchev was really starting to make the first moves of the Cold War, and Berlin Airlift, and that's when the first tit for tat started that went on for the next 4 decades. But I could be getting times off. But JFK was lamenting about this to one of the journalists he had over for dinner, and just always rubbing shoulders with the other snooty high elites. But he was talking about this, and the guy said, well, you got to look at it from their perspective. There's a democratic enclave in the middle of their half of the country. Well, we got our own Russian enclave just 3 blocks from the White House, the Russian embassy. Or the Soviet embassy, Soviet at the time. They said JFK's knife stopped between his plate and his mouth. And he said, they have an atomic bomb there. They smuggled the pieces in diplomatic pouches and constructed it in the attic. Just like that, if they detonate it, there goes D.C. There goes the White House, the Pentagon, and I guess Congress. And the journalist said, yeah, sure, why not? Entertaining the idea. And JFK said, no, really, that's what I'm told. The journalist, still not buying, said, sure. And JFK said, is there something you know that I don't? And to me, that is... And they never found it. And they still haven't, allegedly. But to me, that makes perfect sense in this time of when it comes down to seconds, when seconds matter. I mean, Eisenhower, when he brought in JFK the day before JFK was inaugurated, Eisenhower gave him the whole tour, the whole shebang. And then what did he do? And he said at the very end, he picked up the phone in the Oval Office and he just said, Opal 3, and hung up. And like a minute later, JFK said, you start to feel it in your chest, doop, 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 of a Marine helicopter coming down to pick up the president and no one else. Armed guards on either side. You try to get on the helicopter, you're catching a bullet between the eyes. And that was so they could take you to the nearest bunker. So if you just pick up the phone and say Opal 3, that's how quick it is, because it comes down to seconds. We're no longer in World War II. There is now literally a flash and it's gone. So you've got to be able to get under immediately.
Well, the only problem with that is if we did that, how could we assure that 1, 2, 10, 20 of them wouldn't fall into the wrong hands?
And that's why I imagine that we didn't do it, is how easy does a false flag become? Shit, imagine if you're a third party. Imagine if you're Russia right now and you're finding out that we have them still in, I don't know, Beijing. Why would you not go in there and set them off, divide and conquer, right? Watch U.S. and China destroy each other? Or What if you discover one in Moscow that's been there since the Nixon administration? Well, shit, that's got U.S. fingerprints on it. Man, if I want a war with the United States, it's just fell into my lap. Set it off. Oh my God, it was the United States. It's...
Yeah.
But that's what I think of is, man, wouldn't that be the way to go?
Well, but think how careful we've been with that. Remember when Eisenhower deployed the 100 nuclear warheads to Great Britain, but he left the cores in New Mexico?
Mm-hmm.
And that's during the Berlin crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've been appropriately careful with this material. If we were to start leaving bombs around for a rainy day, I would just be terrified that Al Qaeda or somebody would get a hand on one of them, and they would not hesitate to use them.
Have you ever read Command and Control?
No.
That's by the guy that wrote Fast Food Nation. Eric Schlosser. I don't know. That was a huge book in like the early 2000s.
Uh-huh.
Command and Control. It's about like the nuclear silo accident in Damascus, Arkansas. But they tell the story, and then like they chop it up, and they'll have a couple paragraphs about the history of nuclear accidents. You would hope that we had a good hand on these nuclear weapons, Paul. Holy shit! Scarier than any brinkmanship is just the flaws of man.
Yeah,
dude. Holy shit! There used to be B-52s with nuclear-tipped cruise missiles on foreign Air Force bases in Poland. That U.S. bases that would be guarded by a Polish dude that didn't speak English with a weapon with no with a single pistol with no bullets in it, standing on the side of the spooled up B-52, and oftentimes they'd be higher than a kite. Just
oh boy.
Yeah, man. It's yeah. I don't think we have the control over it that we think we do.
I don't know that we necessarily do, but just the thought of burying them under all these cities, how do we maintain them? How do we keep them safe? How do we communicate with them in a time of crisis? Wow.
Yeah, I mean, what were they called? Operation Blue Rooster or something? That was in Nuking the Moon by Vince Houghton. They talk about, which I believe began with the British, was you're going to take these thermonuclear landmines, because why not? And in the case that the Soviets ever just made an all-out, million-man takeover of Eastern Europe or Western Europe, we'd have these things buried within our own cities that we would have to abandon. And right. It was scorched earth in the 21st century. We were going to have these thermonuclear landmines. And how are they going to... But some of these places were so far north that they were going to be frozen. And we didn't know if the electronics would be faulty or what would happen. So we were going to put them in these big... these things that literally looked like landmines. And we were going to fill them with chicken feed and chickens and bury them. And the body temperature... and just of metabolism, of eating and burning it off and pooping and going around reproducing, that would keep it at the necessary bottom end of temperature that it needed to be at, above freezing.
That is so bizarre.
It is,
I have no words for it.
Dude, it is. These are one of the more sane things that happened during the Cold War. It's Paul, you look like you're tired. You look like you're dozing off. I don't want to keep you.
Man, I was just thinking about one thing in this book that I did not realize that was real interesting. And that was those bombers that Eisenhower had. The ones that, the B-50, I think it was, or was it B-49? That they were so big that the wingspan covered a football field, and the tail was 5 stories high.
B-36 bomber.
B-36. I had no idea how big those things were.
They're bigger than our modern day bombers.
Oh yeah, and the fascinating thing about it was when the tornado whipped through that field out there,
tossed them around.
Oh yeah, 116 of them were damaged. And we had not even disclosed we had 116 of them.
Yeah. It came out in the news, and it was like, wait, I thought the government said we only had 75 bombers or something, but you just said 116 were damaged. So were they all damaged? No, only 116. How many do you have?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that happens, though, all the time. We talk about this. We read these books, Tommy, and we read the unclassified materials. But the truth is, as far as what's really going on, as far as what's really out there, you and I would probably be astonished.
Jaws on the floor. This stuff isn't conspiracy. This stuff it's real.
Yeah, you bet it is. Bet it is.
I mean, think about the DUCC, the Deep Underground Command Center, which in this time of, are there going to be nukes in our own city that we don't even know of, they naturally came to the conclusion that, this is one thing again I always thought was, why would you have a bunker anywhere but directly below you? If you are that important, if you are POTUS, or if you are chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, you really want to risk putting this guy on a helicopter? I don't care how well trained it is. You really want to have there to be any time in between?
Right.
When you hear gunshots, you don't want to be putting on the bulletproof vest. You want to be already in the APC with the helmet on, right?
Yep,
and
that's right.
So the idea of the DUCC, the Deep Underground Command Center, it was going to be 3,500 feet. A mile is 5,280 feet. So what? 2/3? I can't do math. A good portion of a mile directly below the White House. Most of these bunkers, even the deepest ones, are maybe they start. I mean, the bunkers themselves can be these big bubbles, but at the surface, it's normally no more than like 40 to maybe 100 feet of earth. I say only, but this one was to be 3,500 feet directly below the Pentagon. An elevator straight down, below the Pentagon, and then there was going to be an elevator that went 3,500 feet down below the White House, and then just walk across. And they wanted this thing, I think it was going to have equal square footage to the Pentagon, and so we talked about Tsar Bomba earlier, so we were talking about all the 15 kilotons on Hiroshima. Castle Bravo was 15 megatons, so 1,000 times more powerful. Tsar Bomba was 58 megatons, so you're coming up on just shy of 4 times stronger than a Castle Bravo.
Yes.
They wanted the DUCC to survive, quote, multiple direct attacks from 200 to 300 megaton Soviet warheads. Multiple direct attacks from 2 to 300 megatons.
Well, I'm sure there's a reason why we need these this deep penetrating ordnance and the bunker busters that we have.
Sure.
I don't know if the Iranians and the Afghanis can bury something that deep.
No.
But they can bury it deep enough that our regular weapons just can't get to it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's true. They said, so this thing could take multiple hits from 2 to 300 megatons, or I think they said it could survive 2 hits from a 100 megaton bunker buster. A 100 megaton bunker buster. I mean, and this was in the 60s. And
what kind of damage would something like that do? So that would be designed to burrow under the surface before detonating. Wow.
And so we wanted to protect against that.
Yeah.
But to me, and they never built it, but to me, that's actually one of the things Vince Houghton talks about a whole chapter of in Nuking the Moon. And I was so excited when he was like, chapter or whatever, the DUCC. But I almost screamed. I was so excited because I couldn't find anything online after I read Raven Rock. I found one poorly drawn graphic, but I wanted to know more about it because I feel like that would just be you would have to do that. Eventually, all this relocation arc building, all these hardening of existing structures, all this training, eventually it would lead to, you just want something directly below you.
It's the best way to go.
To me, it's the only option. In which
you're in a helicopter and a shock wave comes by and you're wiped out.
Doesn't matter if you're EMP protected. If you get hit with an overpressure of 150 psi, it's so. that's one thing I just thought, or always thought of, is like, that's what I think they would have to have. And it's interesting seeing now with riots in DC that it's when I had on Dale and Joe Tedeye, former Delta Force and Green Beret respectively, who, again, wink wink nudge nudge, may or may not have worked for an intelligence agency. It's they talked about that, let's say this was a foreign power meddling with us, sowing the seeds of unrest, which they said is absolutely, because they said it's not just that's what we do as in a country. They said that's literally what we used to do.
Yes.
Like those two.
Yes.
So we know they're going to do it because I have done it. Well, one thing Tedeye said was, right now is a perfect time to probe. They said things are so crazy that normal security is so heightened, and they're just protecting on these like hyper-focused areas, that now is a time that you can maybe pull off some shit that you wouldn't be able to used to pull off. Now's a time to get some valuable data. You know, we always send bombers to other nations and see how fastly they're intercepted, vice versa. And that's always we just did with the B-1B Lancers on Russian East Coast, I think.
The Black Sea.
Correct. We always do this, and that's we just gauge response times. How quickly were we? How quickly did they come up and escort us? And it's formality. But if you really wanted to do what the most valuable interception data you could possibly get would be something like on 9/11. You know, it's the most dangerous because they might think it's war. But what you'd want to do is you'd want to send Russian bombers. Let's see. We know they intercept us here on a good day when everything's in your favor. But when you know. Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan to get punched in the face. That's what it is. Everyone has a plan to get punched in the face. 9/11, you're punched in the face. So what you would want is 9/11 is a day where you'd send over, again, you don't really want to because it might set off nuclear war. You'd send over a Russian bomber. See how long it takes to be intercepted then. Yeah. That's where you get that valuable data because that's real wartime data.
I don't think we have any idea about how aware we are of those things or what defenses we really have. They just recently, I don't know if you read The Drive, but it's a website written by this guy who's a super defense geek. And it was just released that the F-119
F-117
did in fact have an air-to-air roll.
Yeah.
And was designed to intercept enemy tankers in the air-to-air rolls.
Yeah.
And that was kept secret for the last 40 years. And they kept saying, oh, no, the thing's unstable. It's not a fighter. It's strictly a bomber, a ground attack aircraft. When the whole time, who knows how many of these things have been out there shadowing these Russian reconnaissance planes and Chinese reconnaissance. Who knows? And they're still active today. What is it, 7 years after they were officially retired, they're still flying over Topano.
Yeah.
And
Tonopah.
Yeah, and so they're still out there, and we don't even know. And that's something that they designed in the 70s.
Yeah. I mean, I had on this episode 110 on Friday, episode 108, I had on David Libby, who is a former USAF veteran and former base historian for Holloman Air Force Base, and he knows all about the F-117. He was cleared to interview generals and fighters back when it was still classified. It's his favorite plane. I sent him that link because I had him on before. I'd had him on twice before. I sent him that link last week, and that's when we decided to do a podcast because he said I didn't know about that.
Oh, there you go.
So he called his boss, who is cleared even higher than him, who he had not talked to, he said, in 20 years. And they talked on the phone for a half hour. He said his boss didn't know about it. So his boss is coming on next Wednesday to talk about it.
Wow.
But yeah, because he said he had no idea. He said they were talking to each other. He said they were both on the phone. They said just slack-jawed, going, how? Where? What? How would you... But that's what I said, is what you're alluding to. That's what I said to him. I said, that just makes you think, how high does this stuff go? How classified and compartmentalized does this stuff go? They talked about, there's there's classified, or there's confidential, classified, secret, top secret, and above top secret is special compartmentalized, or special access programs, SAP, and I think above that is TSSCI, top secret, special compartmentalized intelligence.
Yeah.
Back to Raven Rock, they said that there was one even higher than that, and it was called Furtherance, which, if there isn't a more badass code name, but it was...
That's a good one.
Yeah, they said that was on a report given to Kissinger. It's called Furtherance.
Yeah.
And it was just about... It was about these continuity of government things. It's... I mean, dude, one of the plans was, just in case just in case we couldn't get in touch with anyone, to be able to fire a retaliatory strike, we had things called RCBMs, which were ICBMs, but instead of a nuclear warhead, we put a radio beacon in the tip.
Mm-hmm.
And these would have a one-time code that, whereas every nuclear silo is independent of one another, even if they're lined up on the same field, they're all independent of one another, different keys, different codes, different power sources. They had these RCBMs, and I think they said they had something like 4 of them out near NORAD, and it would be in case we can't get in touch, and I think this was Raven Rock, they talked about this, in case we can't get in touch with any of these silos, we have these things that would shoot north, south, east, west, and they would go broadcasting this almost master key to all the ICBMs. So as these things streaked across the nation, you would just see ICBMs taking off one after another, and it was to launch everything to their predetermined targets. Another thing was a huge plane they had that had a 5-mile long ultra low frequency, or extremely low, ELF, which is lower than ultra low, extremely low frequency antenna, where the wavelength is something in the miles instead of like millimeters. They have these big things up to 5 miles long. They're antennas, and you slowly unleash them from a plane, and the plane would go in a holding pattern about a mile long in circumference, and it would just do. And as it released this thing, it would start trailing it and form, just like if you were to take a rope and do that, and it forms this coil, you would form these big coils, a mile tall and a mile wide. Because it's on a plane, you could deploy these anywhere in the world. And with these, you could send go codes to nuclear submarines.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing in this book that I found the most disturbing and probably the most valuable. We've heard a lot of talk about the deep state and how our country is really run by these entrenched elite
Unelected
bureaucrats, and nobody ever really affects that, and it just continues and continues. This book disclosed that toward the end of the Nixon administration,
oh yeah,
that Kissinger, who's like Mr. Deep State,
yeah,
had instructed the Secretary of Defense that, hey, listen, in case Nixon gives any military orders, launching anything like that, you run it by me first.
Mm-hmm. And he
because
did.
I think he's drinking too much, and he's depressed.
Yeah.
And so you have the non-elected Secretary of State,
foreign-born,
and a confirmed internationalist who's taken the authority over the nation's nuclear launch capability. And then when Nixon got on board Air Force One after he resigned,
before he resigned,
watching and listening to
he resigned.
Yes, before he resigned, he's waiting for Ford to be sworn in, and he thinks he's still the president. And he ordered them to transport the black bag with him, the football, with the codes. And it turns out they didn't do it. They kept it.
They didn't even put it on the plane. For that
time, from when he took off until it was passed on to Gerald Ford, who had that power?
Kissinger. Think about that. The president impeached. I don't know what, he was still president. I think you're right. I think he may have resigned, but he was still technically president. And he got on Air Force One to be flown home. And mid-flight is when Ford would be sworn in.
Yes.
But he is president up until that point. And he was on board, and yeah, they said drinking heavily, had been for a couple days. He ordered his martini. I've listened to it. So, what is it? Shaken, not stirred, lightly. And the guy literally knew exactly what type of... Yeah.
Lemon,
yeah.
gin.
Served, chilled. Served immediately. And it's, But yeah, and he's looking at the clocks, and he's, But what he had said the day before is, I want to assure the American people that I will still be the president, and I will still be in control of the suitcase, the black bag, up until the final second, because that is like Garret Graff said. He goes, "There's not. The United States doesn't have a throne or a crown or a scepter, maybe the desk in the Oval Office, but really that you pass on to the next leader." He said, "Really, our sovereignty, our holy grail, is the suitcase. Whoever has that's the real politic. That's beyond the words of 'I'm the president.' That is, I know I can vaporize your nation in a half an hour. So that's the real. Okay, you are the head honcho. You're in charge. You have the gun. It's not just written on paper. It's you can tell me that I can't come into your house and it's a gun-free zone. But if I have the gun, I'm in control." Nixon said, "I have the bombs."
Correct.
But Kissinger went to. I can't remember the name of the guy, but he said, "Yeah, don't if Nixon goes on any madman thing in his final hours, drinking heavily, depressed, ashamed, don't run it by me first, and I'll tell you whether or not to go.
Right. Don't
put the bag on the plane with him, and not only that, and don't tell him any of this." And that's what happened.
Yeah.
You're right, man. If that doesn't give a little legitimacy to the idea of a deep state, and not only that, if there was a deep state, man, all you would need to do is you guys just stay in the bunkers. The rest, whatever's going on the surface, that would all be for show.
Exactly right.
It really wouldn't matter. If you were in the bunkers, you are the entrenched power structure that does not move. You are the secret AT&T backbone. The rest is bread and circus.
Yeah, and the president and his top advisors don't have any idea who these people are.
No.
Or what they're doing or where they are.
Mm-hmm.
None.
Yeah, it's always. I mean, they talked about with some of the like UFO programs, Blue Book. I don't know any of that. Project Grudge, Project Sign. A lot of these things is it wouldn't be the head. It wouldn't be who you'd think it would be. Here's this group of officials. It's the head. No, because the head changes. The head can be voted in or out or appointed. Who would often be the gatekeeper to this stuff would just be one of the lower guys. Is it one of the Star Wars movie where that's what I remember being when I was little? It's one of the things where it's like the queen isn't actually the queen. The queen is one of like the guards, and it was like a safety protocol.
Oh, maybe it is Star Wars. I know what you're talking about, and I can't quite place it.
I think I was like 8 or 9.
It is the Princess of Naboo or whatever, or something like that.
Would have been like the late 90s. That's right. Yeah, I always remember where it's like the princess or the queen is actually just another person, and the real queen is one of the guards, and it's a security protocol because no one's going to go for that guard.
That picture that was released the other day of Queen Elizabeth's body double?
No.
Yeah, they showed her. She's been working for the Queen for over 30 years.
Jesus Christ.
And she goes places and tests them out, and I mean, as the Queen, it was real interesting.
No, Jesus. Excuse me.
You know these people exist. I mean, we know they do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it makes no sense why you wouldn't. It's but yeah, it's if there were to be an entrenched structure, that's what it would be. It'd be someone that you don't. It'd be someone like I don't know. Yeah, it'd be like the secretary. It'd be like the Secretary of State is like the actual president or something, right? That's what it would be, and you wouldn't know. and
Right.
maybe even the president wouldn't know. But I don't know, man, when you hear more and more about this, and it's a lot of who is determined irreplaceable and who cannot, their work cannot be interrupted. If that doesn't give credence to the idea of a deep state, nothing would matter. Or
Literally deep, 3,000 feet under the ground.
Quite literally. I mean, man, you could have the real president, 3,500 feet under the White House. And not only that, the actual president might not know.
Right.
You know? It wouldn't just be like, it'd be like Donna Brazile with the card. She'd be like, it doesn't exist. And it'd be like, well, actually, Mr. Trump, it does exist. There's someone under there.
I don't doubt it. I mean, the mafia's run like that for 100 years. Really? Where there's just someone out front that's the front boss, and the real boss stays in the background, wielding the real power, while the front boss is out there taking the heat. Makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And our government, run like organized crime, makes perfect sense.
Why wouldn't it? Yeah, it's I'll wrap it up with this line. Do you ever listen to Bill Hicks?
No.
Bill Hicks, another great comedian, died in '93, but he has a bit about JFK, and he goes, "The entire world's run by a small group of people, just a handful. This isn't a conspiracy. Everyone knows this, and if you don't know it, you're not paying attention." What I think happens on the day you're elected is you give your whole fanfare tour, you give your speech, and then afterwards you go into a room deep under the Oval Office. You go in there, and it's the 12 industrialist capitalist scumfucks that got you in there. Bankers, defense contractors. It's all these old demonic-looking guys, wrinkly white guys with no hair, boils everywhere, and they're all smoking cigars around this big old wooden table. Looks like it's been there forever, because it has. And they're smoking. You come in there, and they sit you down at a table, and without saying a word, or without saying anything to you, one of the guys goes, "Roll the film." And a projector rolls on down, and then this old grainy thing starts going. And it's a video of the Zapruder film, or it's a video of the JFK assassination, but it's not the Zapruder film. It's from an angle you've never quite seen before that looks suspiciously like the grassy knoll. And then the projector rolls back up, and the guy goes, "Any questions?" And the president says, "Tell me what my agenda is. We bomb Baghdad. You got it." And that's what really happens. Roll the film.
Yeah.
Any questions? What am I doing? Who's my boss? What are we doing today? Oh, we're okay. Yeah, I don't know, man. That wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me either.
It
really wouldn't, but I don't know how that explains an unknown, unpredictable entity like Donald Trump getting elected. If they truly controlled everything, you'd think Hillary would be the president.
Yeah, to me that makes perfect sense. Again, what did they talk about in Raven Rock? The madman theory. That was Nixon's theory, where they were going to have the CIA leak stuff to foreign intelligence, obviously anonymously. That said, Nixon's top guys, including Kissinger, they would all be saying, they'd leak these transcripts of them saying, "Boy, Nixon's sure crazy. He's going to do anything to stop the Soviets. Like, he might even drop nukes in Vietnam. I sure hope he doesn't." But it's this whole, you leak it, and the idea is that, hey, you think Nixon's acting crazy on the world stage, and no, the reality is we can't control him either. So just, I hope. But then you leak it. You don't say it directly. You literally leak it. And it's like, hey, we just got this leak thing of the president's inner circle all talking to each other like, dude, we don't have a lid on this thing. I don't know who's in control. That makes sense, because if it is all an intelligence operation, which it was, Nixon was part of this. They talked about it. They planned it out. They literally were like, yeah, let's execute this.
Well, what is happening again now, Tommy?
So we
got all these generals coming out and saying the president's not stable. We don't know what he's going to do. He's a threat to the Constitution.
You're right. Oh man, you're right.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Colin Powell.
Yeah. And Dempsey and a couple others.
Did Rex Tillerson? Yeah, didn't Rex Tillerson say something when he
Some
left?
time ago, yeah.
I don't know what's worse. I don't know
Maybe they're trying to tell the Chinese, hey, you better not mess around.
Maybe that's what. Maybe it's an intelligence operation, or maybe he is just that unhinged,
Or both.
or both. Jeez, you're right. Oh, Jesus. Paul Whitcombe, I will let you go, sir. Yeah, so anyone listening, Paul and I are going to do, we're going to just kind of, Bill O'Reilly, fuck it, do it live. We're going to just create this thing as we go, where we choose a cool book, and we'll say, hey, we're going to cover this a couple weeks out, and I'll read it, or Paul will read it, and it will come back on a couple weeks and just discuss it like we did today with Raven Rock, and like we did 2 weeks, or last 2 weeks, I don't know, with Operation Paperclip by Annie Jacobson. And if you're listening, you could listen in and go, oh, cool. When you're doing it in 2 weeks, listen to it, and then tune in when we put up the episode, and it'd just be a way of discussing stuff, because, I mean, I think some of this stuff is so cool, and not shitting on these things, but I don't know, something like kind of mainstream, that's not like a hipster, but more like a mainstream series. I don't really want to do those because you can get those anywhere. I think there are some really cool books that are nonfiction that not a lot of people know about. Something like Continuity of Government. This book isn't classified. You can go get this book on Audible. I'll put the link in here. But you read it and it's like, does everyone not know about this?
Right.
You think this would be like a 60-minute special. But it's not. And so what Paul and I are going to start doing is, I don't know, very loosely, really no structure, just kind of wing it, see what happens, is choose some cool books and choose like a date farther out and do an episode and chat about it. I don't know, maybe I can somehow figure out like live streaming. I could figure out commenting. If people wanted to join in and actually interact, I would make an exception for those as opposed to other episodes that are not live. But yeah, we are figuring this out as we go. This is not even beta testing. We're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what works. We're just gonna see how it happens. But Paul, on that note, do you have, because you have now read 2 books on 2 of my favorite books, and I think it is rude of me to continue to throw books at you. Do you have a book that you would love to discuss?
I think what I would suggest is you pick the next one. That'll give me time to choose from my list.
Okay.
But I'm not prepared to pick just one today.
Yeah.
Too many good things out there.
Yeah. Let's see. I want to see if bear with me for a second. I want to, because the last 2 books I already listened to several times. I think you should go in blind with you, so you're not coming in here to someone who's got the stack, the deck stacked against you. I don't need to do this right now in the podcast, but I'll choose a book and I'll make a post or something about it. We can choose it and go through it. Yeah, and I'll also put it like a month out, so there's not this like week like you got to do it now, because that's not fun. If it's not fun, we're not going to do it. So we'll flesh this out. I'm blabbering right now. We don't need to do this right now. Paul Whitcombe, thank you very much, sir. Always a pleasure. I'm glad to have someone else that has the same interests as me and will indulge my rants. Is an honor, sir.
My rants, they're great.
They are. They're
way.
I think they're great, but I think that's also a sign of psychosis, where you think you're brilliant and no one else understands you. No one wants to talk about the nuclear bunkers, but
a touch of psychosis never hurt anybody.
Yeah. What Joe Rogan say? Madness and genius are next door neighbors, and they borrow each other's sugar. That's
so true. There's a thin line between clever and stupid.
Yeah, or insanity is insanity. The difference between insanity and genius is defined or is separated by monetary success.
Yeah, that's so true.
So if you're starting a company in your garage with a desk and you want to call it Amazon, and you maybe sell books, maybe your name is Beth Bezos, you're insane Until you're worth 150 billion. So
That's right.
yeah, but you're insane until then. Make no mistake, you're insane until then.
Till then,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So
Clearly, I'm not sure he isn't, but
he very well could be. Jeff Bezos is, I don't know, man. We could go into a whole deep state conspiracy with that one. But Paul Whitcombe, thank you, sir. It is always an honor and a pleasure. And stay safe out there. Have you seen any National Guard around you? Is it still?
yes, we have an armory here in town, and so I see them all the time.
Well, hopefully this thing doesn't spark off. Hopefully it doesn't.
It seems to be trending towards more calm. Who knows what'll happen if they continue to disband police departments like they're talking about doing in Minneapolis.
If that really starts to happen, then I will fully believe that this is a foreign intelligence operation.
Well, it is happening. The 9 of the 13 Minneapolis city council members have already stated they intend to vote to disband the police department.
Veto-proof disbanding bill. I saw that. I'm having on a former NYPD officer tomorrow to talk about this in New York.
Yes.
Shit, man. If that starts, well, then you're only a stone throw to let's disband the FBI and then let's defund the Department of Defense. And to me, that just says foreign intelligence operation.
Those are the next dominoes to fall.
Yep. So, June 9th, 2020, 3:44 p.m. Eastern. At this time, the United States is standing, and we have not gone to continuity of government yet. Let's hope it stays that way. Paul Whitcombe, thank you, sir. Godspeed.
Thank you, my friend.
Later, buddy.